Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. We're going live to South Africa. Michael Tellinger with us as we talk about vanished and ancient civilizations and some of his latest work and discoveries next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Michael Tellinger with us again, author, scientist, explorer, humanitarian. He's become a real-life Indiana Jones, making groundbreaking discoveries about advanced but vanished civilizations at the southern tip of Africa. His continued analytical scientific approach has produced stunning new evidence that will force a lot of people to rethink our origins and rewrite our history books. Michael exposed a vanished civilization at the southern tip of Africa that left behind more than 10 million stone ruins. A couple of his books include Adam's Calendar, Temples of the African Gods, Slave Species of the Gods. Michael, welcome, and how are things in South Africa, my friend?
Hello, George. Good to hear a voice again.
You too.
Things are, I guess, as they are anywhere else in the world right now. Tense, confusing. People are wondering what the hell's going on, what our governments are doing. They all seem to be behaving irrationally and crazily. So things are strange. But otherwise, it's a beautiful place to be. The people are beautiful, and everyone is looking for a way out of this insanity we seem to find ourselves in.
And with what's going on worldwide with these ancient civilizations, have we really learned anything from what they have learned from the past? Well,
we certainly have learned a lot. I can speak for myself and for the many amazing researchers that I've met, at the events that you and I have met over the years. In the USA and in other parts of the world, there are some incredible discoveries that have been made by people, and I'm one of those that have discovered ancient technology, whether it's electricity or phaser technology or energy generating technology or healing technology and so forth, food cultivation technology and so much more. But if we don't take that and actually put it to use for our civilization today, then we really are slipping down a very, very dangerous, slippery slope onto the wrong side of where we'd like to be as a civilization. And what is just spectacular is that none of the discoveries that have been made, the new energy technology, everything that you have discussed over so many years, all the new technologies that I've come across with these amazing inventors and scientists, none of this has reached the human population. All of it is locked up, is hidden from sight, and it just keeps perpetuating human misery every step of the way.
Let's go back to the days of the Anunnaki, if we can, Michael. And do you accept the work of Zecharia Sitchin that the Anunnaki came from another close-by planet?
I accept a lot of what Zecharia wrote about. I found that the more research I have done here in South Africa, the fundamentals of everything that Zecharia wrote remain the same, but some of the details have changed, and I have found physical evidence to have reached slightly different conclusions. For example, the monoatomic gold side of things, the vast amount of gold that the Anunnaki have mined, not just in Southern Africa, but across the world. And I think this is often missed and misunderstood by researchers and historians into ancient civilizations. the unimaginable vastness of the gold mining exploration that covered the entire planet. It is unimaginable to us. I tell you what, George, that's what blew my mind. Across Australia, across Southern Africa, wherever you go, across the United States, across Canada, across South America, across Europe, the amount of gold mining that I have identified completely blows my mind. And I'm sure that you've discussed the whole idea that the Grand Canyon was actually an ancient mine or was excavated. It was not natural erosion. A lot of evidence seems to point in that direction. And then you start looking at all the other canyons around the world, from the small ones to the very large ones like the Grand Canyon. And you start to see the fingerprints of ancient civilizations, very advanced civilizations, most likely Annunaki and possibly some others. And the vast amount of gold that they mined across the planet is simply unimaginable to us. And
it's got to be worth billions of dollars.
Go ahead, George. Sorry, what was that?
It's got to be worth billions of dollars today. We've got a little lag because you're in South Africa, but you're coming in fine.
Oh my God! I don't think we could put a number on that. And then you got to ask yourself, the question remains, what was that? What was that for? What did they need that gold for? And the obsession for that gold is not. It can't be money and wealth. It had to be something else. So I've sort of reached a conclusion now that it had to do something with survival. It had to do something with their own personal survival. And what Zachariah Sitchin wrote about was the fact that they used the gold to protect their planet against, deadly rays, cosmic rays, and so forth. And I'm suspecting that that may not have been the correct translation or interpretation. Because, we've learned from David Hudson's work a long time ago already that when you take monoatomic gold and you expose it to certain frequencies, temperature, for example, and temperature is really just the frequency and the vibration of molecules, right? So if we think of temperature as a frequency and a vibrational effect, and they started to expose a little pile of monoatomic gold in the lab to temperature in degrees Celsius.
There's got to be some kind of special properties about this, because I have heard about too many different civilizations using it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back to the subject, because this is really important, and this is one of these discoveries that you come across as you do your research and meet remarkable people that have done amazing research, and this forced me to reach a very different conclusion about the Anunnaki and what they may have been doing. So David Hudson's research was really critical in making me reach certain conclusions. One of the things he discovered when working with the monoatomic gold, when they started exposing this little pile of white powder of monoatomic gold, very pure, to heat temperature in degrees Celsius, by the time it got to 700 degrees Celsius, the little pile of the white powder started to disappear. And by the time it got to 800 degrees Celsius, that pile of white powder was gone. It vanished. So now they were confused, and they wondered, is it still there? Is it just invisible? Or has it moved into a different dimension? So they took a little brush that they had in a tube where they had the white powder of gold, and they brushed the little pan that the pile of white powder was on to try and disturb it. And they couldn't see it, obviously, so they just brushed the pan, thinking that if the pile of white powder was simply invisible, it'll be disturbed if it ever comes back. If it's not disturbed, then it means it wasn't there when we brushed it around. And then they started to drop the temperature from 800 degrees down, and slowly but surely, lo and behold, the pile of white powder started to reappear. And by the time they got to 700 degrees Celsius, the full pile of white powder was there exactly undisturbed. So the conclusion that was reached, which an obvious conclusion, is that the pile of white powder moved into a different dimension. It was not there to be disturbed by the brushing. So what this tells us is that monoatomic gold has the property of moving between dimensions or going into other dimensions. And so now we come back to the Anunnaki. They were obsessed with the white powder of gold, obviously for reasons of longevity or immortality in this density on this planet, in this gravity, because this was not their home. They came from somewhere else. But where is it that they came from? And what is it that they did to be hiding out on planet Earth or to be doing something here to attain all that gold? And I started to think, well, one of the other stories I heard in my extensive travels was actually from a MUFON researcher in Minneapolis many, many years ago. I think this was 2010. And he told me that they were researching some UFOs and ETs on a farm outside of Minneapolis somewhere. And when he arrived there, he spoke to the farmer who had a number of ETs living on his land, and the farmer was quite okay with it. He'd been so used to it that it didn't bother him anymore. And so they went and investigated this. And as the guy was leaving, he said, next time you communicate with these ETs, ask them about the Anunnaki. So the farmer didn't know the word Anunnaki. He wrote it down because he never heard of the Anunnaki. And he apparently communicated with these ETs telepathically. And as the MUFON guy was driving away, and forgive me, I forget his name now, and I didn't make a note of it for this interview now. So as he was driving away, the farmer phones him literally 10 or 15 minutes later. And he says, well, I asked the ETs about the Anunnaki, and they said, their response was that the Anunnaki had created or caused such a great sin against all of creation that they were cast out of the book of life. This was the response. So you can imagine a farmer that's never heard of the Anunnaki now suddenly gets a response like this.
Pretty dramatic stuff.
I thought hard. Yeah, have you ever heard of that before? From the many people you've discussed this with.
Not that story, no, but that is fascinating.
So I thought long and hard about this. I thought, well, what could it possibly be? And slowly but surely, with many other dots, and like I say, connecting the dots and the pockets of information that you get, over many years of research, little gems here and there, it started to dawn on me that what the Anunnaki did here is they literally went against the laws of nature and creation throughout the universe. And that is because they messed with a species. They removed the creatures, the new creature, I'm talking about humanity now. They removed the creature's capacity to understand who they are and consciousness, so they blocked their consciousness, their connectedness, and by consciousness, I mean their connectedness to creation, to everything in creation, and all-knowingness. And they prevented this new creature that they created and cloned from knowing their place in the universe and who they are. And they did that for the purpose of creating a lower intellect and intelligent creature or a species to be their slave, to enslave in the gold mines. And to do that, they also created what is often referred to as the karmic trap. And the Anunnaki seem to be responsible for that, this karmic trap. So I thought that if they are responsible for this, and the conscious beings in the universe are aware of the Anunnaki doing this, maybe they were being pursued or hunted by, beings of higher consciousness, or they were being sought out, so they would prevent them from doing this to a whole planet of beings. And the Anunnaki were using monoatomic gold to hide their whereabouts, to keep moving between dimensions so that they wouldn't be found. And so it's a combination of longevity, being able to survive in this climate, and also for their planet or wherever it is they came from, to surround it or envelop it in this cloak of monoatomic dust that will then allow them to move between dimensions, the way that little pile of white powder of gold moved out of this dimension into another one and then came back when it was exposed to a certain frequency. And so that's where my mind is sitting at the moment, with the Annunaki, their quest for gold, the monoatomic gold properties, longevity, and all that's in one big pot.
Why was this knowledge, Michael, lost? It just seems to have vanished.
Yeah, I firmly believe, George, that the knowledge wasn't lost. It was hidden from us by a repetitive cycle of wiping clean our history to create a whole new narrative, to make humanity forget who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. As far back, as very, very recently. Just think about how little we know about our history. The further back in time we go, the less we know about our human history. And my discoveries here absolutely show, I have physical proof and evidence that the ancient history of the world was far, far removed from anything we could possibly imagine. And that mythology is probably much closer to the history of the world than any other history book that we read. So there's definitely overwhelming evidence, and more of it is coming out if you watch the many YouTube channels and researchers that are coming out in large numbers, showing us that every few hundred years or so, the global elite, who may be ETs, who may be Anunnaki, who may be immortal beings, and that's why they can plan this over such long periods of time, and we just don't know what's going on. We simply don't know, and we forget. And history books are removed, they're replaced by new narratives, by new history. It becomes a very difficult exercise to try and navigate.
Michael, I never asked you this, but where do you think the historic Garden of Eden might have been?
That's $1 million question, George.
It is indeed.
There's so many different theories, and strangely enough, every theory often has some very serious, substantial support for that theory. Like, some people believe the original Garden of Eden was at the North Pole. Some people believe it was in Mesopotamia. Some people believe that it's here in southern Africa, where the ancient Anunnaki gold mines were, and some of the most original gold mines, and the 10 million stone circles. So and the reason I'm saying that is because there was so much food grown here at these ancient times, 300,000 years ago, that we have 500,000 square kilometers of agricultural terraces. So at some stage, there was a huge amount of food that was being grown here. So it's difficult to say where the original Garden of Eden was. And if humanity was cloned and created the way some of us believe by Enki, the Anunnaki supreme deity, and that cloning happened here in southern Africa at Adam's Calendar, or around Adam's Calendar, and possibly also associated with Great Zimbabwe and the famous Tsadila Hills site in Botswana. So somewhere here in southern Africa is potentially a very good candidate for the original Garden of Eden.
I think you're right, absolutely. And with everything that goes with it, Satan in the works, who knows, huh?
Yeah. The some of the shamanic downloads and contact we've had with the spirit beings and the guardian ancestors of these ancient sites have been absolutely mind-blowing and revealing. And the fascinating thing is that the information is consistent and repetitive. So it's not as if you get one bit of information on this journey when you go there once, and the next time you revisit that site with a different shaman or a spiritual, someone that has contact with the spirit world, they tell you a different story. The answers and the stories are consistent. And at Tsadila Hills, for example, where the ancient serpent, the famous ancient serpent cave is, that in fact, I believe that it's still officially the oldest human site recognized by mainstream archaeology, because the mainstream archaeology doesn't like ancient times and ancient dates, right? And yet, mainstream archaeology has agreed and suggests that 75,000 years ago, humans were already holding ceremonies and burning fire and candles or whatever they were doing, fire ceremonies, at the serpent worship site in Sodilo Hills, northern Botswana. So, I forgot my train of thought. I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah, and nevertheless.
Well, and let me ask you about the stone circles, because you have said in the past that they had healing properties. Explain that.
Oh, yes. So it took me a few years to figure out what the stone circles were. You know, after I first was exposed to them in 2007, by around 2010, we realized that the stone circles were emitting powerful sound frequencies in the gigahertz, very powerful electromagnetic fields and magnetic fields, and that they were a absolute phenomenon, a vibrational energy frequency phenomenon, and that each stone circle was completely unique. And each stone circle, suddenly I realized my understanding and my study into sound, resonance, frequency, and the study of cymatics, the different shapes represented by different sound frequencies, I suddenly realized that each stone circle is a physical representation of the sound frequency that comes out of the ground at that specific point. So it literally is an amplification device for Earth's natural sound frequencies that come out of the ground. And the Annunaki obviously had a way. First of all, I believe the Annunaki were the original architects of these stone circles. All the research and shamanic, readings and past life regressions points towards this. And so the Annunaki somehow knew how to see the cymatic shapes of the frequency coming out of the earth at a specific place. And then they used their human slaves that they cloned, and possibly other beings, who knows, at this stage it's still a bit foggy, to then place the stones along the cymatic patterns. So by doing that, you then amplify the sound frequencies that come out of the ground, and you create an amplification device. And this is why when you put 10 million of these stone circles together, they generate an insane, unimaginable amount of energy that can be used as sound frequency, sound energy, as electromagnetic energy, as magnetic energy, or electricity itself. So you can create phaser beams, you can create laser beams, you can create levitation technologies, you can create a whole levitation platform that hovers collectively above these 10 million stone circles, because they're all connected to each other by the channels and the terraces that hold them together like a giant spider's web. So as the energy comes out of the ground through the stone circles, they shoot up into the sky. And at some point, they will reach some sort of a buffer area where they neutralize or meet or stop. And it seems to be at that point that there's some sort of it seems to be at about 1,000 feet or 300 meters above the stone circles, that there's some sort of a magnetic, energetic field that lies there. So I started to realize that something is creating the healing property. And then obviously the penny dropped for me when I realized that we're dealing with cymatic shapes, cymatic patterns. So what happens is that every stone circle is amplifying Earth's natural frequencies that are probably related around the Schumann resonance. And these are low frequency, 7.83, up to, within that range, up to 10, 12 hertz or whatever it may be. Who knows at this stage? We haven't measured it that accurately yet. You need very sophisticated equipment for that. So every one of these earth frequencies is very good. These are earth frequencies that are good for our bodies. We should be resonating with these frequencies.
Who taught these ancient people, Michael, how to do this?
Well, look, when you say ancient people, we got to then ask the question, are we talking about the Anunnaki that built the stone circles? Or are we talking about the people that were the slaves that built them, that didn't know what they were doing, but only much, much later started to figure this out. So what I did find here is one of the very mysterious hidden epochs of Southern African history, which our historians just do not talk about. You do not find this in any of our history books. This is a part of Southern African history that's been completely removed from all our history books, and that is the presence of the Dravidians, the very wise ancient civilizations from India, first of all, from the Indus Valley that then eventually migrated down to southern India and Sri Lanka. And the Dravidians are often referred to as one of the most primordial, advanced, smart, intelligent civilizations on Earth. And I'm talking about human civilizations now. This is way after the cloning of the species and so forth, right? So there's overwhelming evidence that the Dravidians were in South Africa and Southern Africa, which includes South Africa, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Mozambique, which is on the Indian Ocean coast, just north of the South African coast. That the Dravidians were here already 1000 BC. So 3,000 years ago, the Dravidians were here mining gold. And their fingerprints are all over southern Africa. So this is not a secret. This is not a theory or a hypothesis. The Dravidians were here in large numbers mining gold for a long time. And many of these stone circles were used by the Dravidians and converted by the Dravidians for their purposes and their needs. And some of these conversions of the stone circles that were originally energy-generating devices were converted by the Dravidians for their own purpose. So suddenly they had doors and entrances and so forth. And some of them you can see very distinctly Dravidian shapes that were created out of the stone circles. One of them has become quite a famous one, just up the road from where I live, where the Stone Circle Lodge and Museum is, where I do the tours from, and where the Ubuntu head office, worldwide head office, is situated as well. And one of these stone circles is actually structured in a Dravidian fertility shape, a very well-recognized Dravidian fertility shape. So it was obviously used by the Dravidians as a fertility site. Now, how did the Dravidians, to answer your question, how did the people discover this and how did they know this?
Who taught them?
Well, the Dravidians were obvious. Sorry?
Who taught them?
Well, they must have picked this information up long before they even arrived in southern Africa. From the Indus Valley, vibrational frequency energies, technologies, they already knew this. Who taught them is a good question. But what I'm leading to here is that they were so smart, they knew this, and they recognized the vibrational frequency of this particular site.
Remarkable.
So how did they know this? Very good question.
Sorry, Michael Tellinger here, our final segment. His latest book, Adam's Calendar, is still available on Amazon and other places that you find your fine books. Michael, there are some who believe the moon was towed into place. I don't think that's the case, but what do you think?
Yeah, the moon remains a mystery, George. It's one of the great mysteries that we face every day, every night. We look up at the sky, we see the moon, and I bet you I'm not the only one that wonders what the hell is that thing that I'm looking at. So I think, based on my current belief, I don't know what the moon is, but what I can tell you is what blew my mind is in February 19th or February 20th, 2019, excuse me, NASA put out a new statement, and I wonder if you've discussed this at all. You should. Anyway, a new statement by NASA is that the Earth's atmosphere is much larger than we previously knew or imagined. The Earth's atmosphere is so large that the moon sits within the Earth's atmosphere. Do you remember that press release?
Yes, I do. We've talked about it a little bit with astrophysicists and planetary scientists, but not a lot.
Yeah. So my feeling is that was an attempt by NASA to cover up the whole argument and question about the Van Allen belt. How did we get through the Van Allen belt to get to the moon 6 times there and back? And more NASA scientists themselves were asking the question, well, how do we do it? How do we get there and back, several times without frying the astronauts and so forth? And they had to deal with the Van Allen belt problem. So they came up with this idea that they just have to extend the Earth's atmosphere that now goes 640,000 kilometers or 385,000 miles or whatever it is, just far enough to include the moon. And with that one statement, they just neutralized all the Van Allen belt arguments. And for me, it was that kind of a press release to deal with this problem that wasn't going away.
East of the Rockies, Joe, Long Island, New York. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Michael, I have a question about the Giants. My question on the Giants is, this is speculative, but would you say they were mostly male or all male, and what were the threats to them in the environment?
Comment on the Giants.
Oh, the Giants. Well, the Giants there's evidence all over the world for giants that's not even debatable anymore. I have in my museum, I have fossilized body parts of giants. We have scattered in the mountains fossilized body parts of giants. And I'm talking from ribs to pieces of fingers and toes and teeth and lungs and very, very large beings. The largest pieces of giants or fossils of giants that I have are lying on the mountains. They're too big. I can't bring them down the mountain. They weigh many tons. And those giants would have been about between 100 and 300 meters, so between 300 and 1,000 feet. And those are still not the biggest ones. The big ones were, like a mile tall, according to Book of Enoch, for example. And what's interesting about the giants is that the feedback I have from some past life regressions and channelings about the first humans cloned by the Annunaki, they were not male or female. They were masculine, strong, but they did not have reproductive organs. That was added later. So the fact that the giants were neither male nor female, or male described as male because they were very masculine and strong, that wouldn't surprise me.
Let's go next to Dee Dee in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to the program. Dee Dee, go ahead.
Hello to both of you. I hope that Michael might be able to clarify something. In the late 80s, I was in Santa Cruz, California on vacation, and we went to this place called the Mystery Spot. It's supposed to be an energy vortex. And anyway, when I was there, going through the little house that they had there and everything, and water was supposed to be running uphill instead of down, and we were standing as if we were at an angle. You might know of that place, George. Anyway, I became very, very ill inside of the place. I became very nauseous. There was like quivering inside my head. And I just became disoriented, very ill. So do you know what might have been going on there? It's supposed to be a vortex area.
Are there some spots around this planet?
Yeah.
Michael, go ahead.
No, George, go ahead. You had something to say. Go ahead, George.
I was going to say, are there some spots around this planet that they have vortexes that affect people like they affected her?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all the stone circles are vortexes. Adam's calendar is a very powerful vortex, and they do affect people. Even my museum, because of all the Taurus stones in my museum, when people walk in there, they feel either elated or sick, or they want to vomit, or they get joyful, and it's all just to do with magnetic fields that are created by sound frequencies that move and spin and that create toroidal fields. Those toroidal fields become very powerful magnetic fields, and those magnetic fields, obviously because they're moving and spinning, create electromagnetic fields. So this is what you experience in that kind of place that the caller has identified, where it looks like water is running uphill and gravity works the other way. It's just all there's some sort of vortex where the magnetic fields are juxtaposed that you do experience these kind of effects around the world. And remember, water is magnetic. Water. So if you have magnetic fields, you can channel water uphill, and so many other things. Magnetism is the energy that drives the universe. So with magnetism, and remember, we're magnetic beings. Everything in us, or every cell, every frequency, every thought we have are sound frequencies that ultimately become little toroidal fields that create magnetic fields. So our entire body is an electromagnetic phenomenon. So if you walk into an electromagnetic vortex or a vortex, energetic vortex, and by that, when people say energetic vortex, it means that they're spinning magnetic fields and magnetic energies that create this kind of effect. And that will affect your body. It'll affect your being. It'll affect your thinking. It'll affect how you feel, whether you're feeling good or nauseous, or it might heal you. It might make you sick. It's a very simple explanation. And unfortunately, we don't know this because we're not taught this at school. Each and every one of us should be taught from grade 1 the fundamental principles of magnetic fields, toroidal fields, and how that affects how we are an extension of these magnetic fields, and therefore we feel vibrational energy and magnetic energy, and it affects us consciously and subconsciously.
Do you believe that the pyramids were built with some kind of force like that, magnetic force?
Yeah, absolutely. I also believe that there's a very strong chance that the pyramids and the stones were actually cast, that they're not cut from rock. That there's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that they were like mixed like cement, and then put into place. So the pyramids remain a huge mystery, obviously, and therefore the debate goes on and on and on.
Let's go to Pete in North Carolina. Welcome to the program. Hi, Pete. You safe from harm's way?
Oh, yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, it's a mess.
But I want to say to Michael, I want to ask him, do you believe that the Ark of the Covenant is in Africa, kept under guard somewhere?
Well, many people believe that it's up in Ethiopia. I know Graham Hancock was there, and he went to that little chapel in Ethiopia where they keep what they believe is the original Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, I've not been there. It's difficult for me to comment on that. So, quite frankly, that's one of those open-ended $1 million or $100 million or $100 billion questions at this stage, because whoever lays his hands on the Ark of the Covenant will essentially be laying his hands on this, probably the centerpiece of the Bible, isn't it?
I think some collector, Michael, might have it in his house somewhere. What do you think of that?
Oh, yeah. Who collected? Graham Hancock collected and take it home.
He might have. You never know. Next up, let's go to Eden in Vacaville, California. Welcome to the show. Hi, Eden. Go ahead.
Hi. Eden's my middle name. I didn't like it for about 30 years.
It's a great name.
It is. And I met Jesus then. I'm now in my 70s, and I learned to like it. And now I tell my wife, from the sidewalk, the back fence, we live in the Garden of Eden.
Yes, you do. There's no question about that. But it's a great name. It's a powerful name, to be sure. Michael, we only have a couple minutes left. Where do people still get your books?
The easiest place to get my books, George, is on Amazon. As much as I don't like to support the big guys, but they still make it, it's the easiest way for me to sell my books.
Let's go east of the Rockies, Salvatore in Virginia. We don't have Michael Tellinger's cell, but maybe I can help you.
Hey, George, the Annunaki never left. They're still here. They just changed their name. Now they're called Democrats.
Boy, they're coming out of the woodwork today, folks. Something is going on in the atmosphere today. My gosh. I'll try one more. Ted in Madeira, tell me you're a sane person, Ted. Go ahead.
Yes, it's actually me. Hi, George.
Hi.
That was too bad you lost Michael. That was a great show, just like the one you had last night with John Hogue.
Yeah.
2 great shows in a row.
Thank
anyway,
you,
I was just going to ask him, what did the building of the Sphinx predate the Great Pyramid, or were they kind of, built at more or less the same time? And also, I wanted to ask him about the time that both of them were built, because mainstream archaeology says about maybe 2500 BC or 2000 BC, but many people feel it was much earlier than that. Maybe as far back as maybe 9,500 years BC, and I was wondering if you have any information about that. And I also wanted to ask him if he thought, from all of his research, that if any nation on this planet might have learned something from ancient technology that would have given might give, hopefully not, but is it possible that it may give some of the weapons that they have in their arsenal some type of power that we're not aware of, we haven't been told about by our governments?
Not sure about that, Ted, but we've got you back, Michael. How old do you think the Sphinx is, Michael?
Oh, my take on all these ancient structures is that they're much older than mainstream tells us. And again, I have to compare it to what we have here in Southern Africa. The stone circles of Southern Africa go back 300,000 years, and I have archaeological and physical evidence to prove that. And the reason I say that is because the rivers and the streams that run down the mountains are younger than the stone circles and the channels and the terraces. The rivers have washed away the stone circles. So we've got to determine how old the rivers are, and the stone circles are older than the rivers. So we're dealing with probably around 300,000 years. That's more or less where it sits. Adam's calendar is in that same region, and it's all to do with gold. And Adam's calendar is aligned with the Great Pyramid of Giza. So there must be a connection. Plus, Great Zimbabwe is in line, so it's Great Pyramid of Giza, Great Zimbabwe, and Adam's calendar all aligned. So somehow they're all connected to the Annunaki and ancient gold mining. So
absolutely, Michael, and they're all much older than they say they are. That is for sure. Michael, thanks for being on the program. We've got your website all linked up at coasttocoastam.com. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.